Hey guys, today I'd like to talk to you about using reliable sources for inquiry or research-based activities, but also for finding information in everyday life, because you should know the difference between a reliable source and one that is just made up or maybe fudged a little bit. So first of all, I'd like to talk to you today about primary and secondary sources. So primary and secondary sources are different because one of them is first-hand and one of them is second-hand. So primary, because that means first, that means that it's a piece of evidence or an artifact that was from someone who was actually there. So this could be a photo of an event, it could be a newspaper article written by a reporter who was actually there, it could be a journal entry written by someone who was actually there, it could be an oral account given to you by someone who was actually there. So you need to keep in mind, though, that everyone has their different perspective of an event. So just because someone was there and said this is the way it happened, it doesn't mean it's necessarily true, because people have different ideas of what caused the event, what happened, whose fault it was, whose actions led to what. So you need to remember that primary sources, while they are really, really good, they are still subjective. They're still someone's perspective. Let's think about it this way. If there were, let's say, a fight at school, some people might have one story of how it happened. Other people might have a different story about how it happened. A teacher might have a different view of how it happened. So while they were all there for the same event, people might have different views of what actually went on. Hopefully we won't have any fights at school, so we won't need to think about that. So that brings us to the second type of sources, which is secondary sources. So these are items, like they're probably written, usually books, that are put together by someone who wasn't actually there for the event. So for example, if in class we're reading a textbook and it's about ancient Egypt, the person who wrote that textbook wasn't actually there thousands of years ago. So while they probably put a lot of research and study into it, they weren't there. So it's not a primary source. It's not the best type of source, but it probably is still pretty good. So that is the difference between primary and secondary sources. If you want to have really the closest to accurate information for your inquiry or your research, you should try and find primary sources. Photos are great because you can analyze them with your own critical eye, and you don't have to just listen to someone else's interpretation of what happened. You can kind of check it out for yourself. But secondary sources can also be good if they're from someone who has put in a lot of research and time and found their own reliable sources to pass on to you.